Welcome to Season 7 of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. This is where we chat with experts in the field, patients who use these devices, physical therapists, and the vendors who make it all happen. Our goal? To share stories, tips, and insights that ultimately help our patients get the best possible outcomes. Tune in and join the conversation. We are thrilled you are here and hope it is the highlight of your day.
Hi everyone, my name is Joris Spiels and this is another episode of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. And with me, as always, is Brent Wright. How you doing, Brent?
Hey Joris, I'm doing well, man. I'm a little jealous of everybody kind of packing up for the Academy meeting that's happening.
Okay.
And I actually think our guest is going to be there as well. So I'll be kind of curious to hear in on some of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really cool things. And, you know, friends of the podcast that have been on the show before are going to have some new things that they're showing. So I'm really excited to kind of see, at least from the social media perspective, what happens, because I will not be attending, unfortunately.
Oh, wow. You're still doing that. You're going to do the baseball thing.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So yeah, I can't miss that. Connor is he's one of the three starting pitchers, and he pitches typically at the end of the week. But then he's also a hitter too. So I would miss a few games, and at this point in life, there's always another show. I think, you know, there's plenty of those to go to.
Okay, cool. So, well, first off, do we have a sponsor for today, Brent?
Yes, and in fact, you may know them.
Okay.
Advanced 3D is going to be sponsoring this season, and yeah, I'm really excited about that.
What's Advanced 3D, Brent?
So Advanced 3D, I'm a part of that along with Paul and Tyler. We are a 3D printing contract manufacturing company that specializes in orthotics and prosthetics, but we do a lot more than that. And I'm really looking forward to actually seeing where this goes. We have some automation coming into play, some web app stuff that's coming down the pike, even some training that you'll find potentially nice is we're going to have some training about mesh mixer and prosthetics.
Nice.
So just trying to get people into 3D printing. I would love for Advanced 3D to be, you know, the contract and manufacturing partner and all that stuff. But really the overall goal is to help provide information for people to take that step into the digital realm.
Yeah, I think that's the cool thing is like if it's right for them, right? Because then they become a good customer, they become a happy customer, they become like a customer for many years. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So that's the main thing is, and we want to have a relationship with our customers. So obviously at some point in time, you've got to talk about price, but that relationship of price and value, I think we provide a good benefit to that.
Okay, cool, man. And you guys, like, you know, why is it important that you guys are only OMP or you're OMP kind of focused?
So the main thing is that we're able to take a look and make sure that the solution is not only clinically relevant, but then safe for the patient. We've been doing this for a long time now, almost 6 years for definitive prosthetic sockets. And, you know, as you're learning, you definitely want somebody to kind of check behind you and make sure that everything's good to go. And we will definitely help give you feedback. And we also don't compromise, say, orientation or build densities or that sort of thing to get your part in the machine. So
nice.
Those are the reasons why you want to look for somebody that can specifically make, you know, your or contract manufacturer 3D print your devices is somebody that knows the space.
Cool. Sounds good. So I had hit up Brent and his friends at Advanced 3D, and we will see you. Hey, so who is our guest today, Mom?
Well, I'm really excited to have Mike Astilla on the show today. He co-founded a company that I think you might find very interesting called Limbguard. Now, one thing that people don't think about when they think about amputations and such is that the people that have had an amputation usually have some sort of fresh suture. They've just had their amputation. They're in a bed, and all those nerves that you have still are telling your brain that you have a foot. So sometimes in the middle of the night, people can get up out of their bed and they think they still have a foot, and they fall. And they could really hurt their leg if they fall straight on their amputation. Well, Michael and his co-founder created Limbguard, and it's essentially a helmet for your leg while you're healing. And there's a couple, and I'm sure he'll cite some studies and all that stuff that go along with it. But it's just a great way to get started on a person's journey, a patient's journey, is to go ahead and have that protection, get some of the sensation of having a prosthesis on your leg. And so anyway, yeah, I'd love to hear, what he's been up to. And he's also a certified clinician. He had a practice, founded a practice, ended up selling his practice, and now he's doing this full time. So I'm really excited to kind of hear that perspective and to hear his journey into the field as well.
All right. Sounds really exciting. Well, welcome to the show, Mike.
Hi. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. That's a great intro, Brent, to the world of limb protection. Can't wait to dive into that.
So how did you first get involved in orthotics and prosthetics?
I was, I'm originally from New Orleans, and my dad had a physical therapy practice down there, sort of a one-man shop. And I thought I wanted to do that. So I went back to New Orleans after college and thought I'd dip into that. And at the time, a lot of physician-owned practices were opening up. And I remember one day going to his clinic, and he came up to me and he said, there's a lot of physician-owned practices popping up here and there. You may want to find something else to dip into. And so that sort of left me thinking, okay, what am I going to do? I sort of like rehab-y type stuff. I've always been a tinkerer. I've rebuilt cars as a teenager and that sort of thing. And thought, all right, well, I want to stay in this realm. And I randomly found a graduate program in Springfield, Massachusetts. It's a master's in biomechanics. Went up there and was I was actually a TA in one of the PT programs, and there was a few PTs were doing a study on AFOs. I didn't actually know what an AFO was. Had never heard of the O&P field. And I said, what is that thing you guys are studying? What are these things? And I remember a couple of PTs said, man, this is awesome. If I wasn't in PT school, I'd be doing this. And, so I dug in a little bit, learned about the program, and just sort of a knee-jerk type thing. I was like, wow, that sounds cool. Let me try to get in there. And lo and behold, Brian Malis, the director at Northwestern, was kind enough to see some potential in me and let me into the program, and the rest is history.
Okay, that's cool. And did you specialize quite early, or did you want to be really broad first, or how did your journey continue?
Yeah. Well, I really was very partial to orthotics initially. But as I, was in the field more and more during my residency, although it wasn't officially a residency back then, I sort of gained an appreciation for prosthetics. And then it wasn't until we started our own practice down in Durham, North Carolina. I kind of fast forwarded there. My wife and I decided to jump down to North Carolina from Chicago, and working in the area, I sort of became more and more interested working with my partner, Laura Riedel, more and more in the prosthetics realm. And so, yeah, just sort of grew organically for me, and just developed an interest in obviously building that part of the business and the practice for us. But it's just sort of a progression there, natural evolution for me.
And if you look at this, did you always want to have your own practice? You ended up partnering with someone. How did that? Was that also kind of organic? Did it happen randomly? Oh, this guy, I can work with this guy.
Yeah.
Or was there a big plan?
No, that's a good question. So Laura and I actually worked together randomly. We're both from Louisiana. We both randomly work for the same national company in the Durham area, and we're just very like-minded. She had a very strong prosthetics background, working down in New Orleans. Mine, not so much. And we just really complemented each other. And to answer your question, yes, I did. I always knew in the back of my head I would have my own company. I didn't know what that looked like, but my dad was an entrepreneur. I knew what that looked like and that lifestyle, and that's sort of what I wanted. I knew I'd have a company. I didn't know I'd want to be in a product based company. So clinical just made a lot more sense to me. So one day, Laura and I were, working with this company and realized, boy, we could probably do this on our own. Shoot, these referral sources really seem to like us, and we seem to be doing a pretty good job. And so, just like that, we partnered up with Mike Neal and Tony Saya, who actually had some clinics in the North Carolina area. And with some support from them, we opened up our Durham practice. And started very scrappy and just doing the work that sort of crossed our plate for a few years. And then, just sort of an organic growth between us.
And having had now like a practice first and now more of a product business, is it very different? Is it if there's people like, it just to me seems like the product business is a lot more like, it's easier to have a life on the side, let's say, and whereas maybe it has its own challenges, right?
Yeah, very much so. We did not know, we didn't know what we were getting into. I mean, we decided to open the clinical practice, and it really wasn't until 10 years into running the clinical practice that we realized there was this need. I'll back up a second and say we weren't the cool kids in town when it came to O&P. We were not part of the prosthetics clinic across the street in our hospital. We couldn't get into the VA hospital because someone lost our application to become a VA contractor. We couldn't get into Duke Hospital. So we had to get very creative and sort of scrappy to sort of try to grow our practice. And it wasn't until I had gone to, I think it was either, might have been a state meeting, and was in the exhibit hall and saw a couple of limb protectors. And I remember coming back from the meeting and having this conversation with Laura saying, if we're ever going to be able to provide prosthetic care and get referrals that are, folks who are new amputees versus what we were currently getting are folks who just sort of maybe had grown tired of their current care providers or moved to the area. If we were actually going to grow and have a developing practice like some of these other folks, because you go to these meetings and of course everyone talks about how big their prosthetic practice is and all the patients they're taking care of. If we're ever going to be that, we have to have a different, source for getting these patients. And so I did some research and realized there was one main protector out there currently. And then Laura had worked a lot with a national company that had their own protector, and she'd had quite a bit of experience back in New Orleans with it. And we thought, well, all right, so let's do this. We're going to go talk to some of the new physicians who come to town because we weren't getting referrals from the other folks. And let's present this pathway of we can provide this care to protect your patient right after surgery. After a couple of in-services, we actually got a referral or two from some of the new physicians. And then we thought, oh boy, we need to actually have these protectors in stock. And mind you, we were very scrappy. I mean, we were buying our cast saws on eBay, and we were buying our furniture in the clinics at Duke Surplus, and a lot of our furniture was from IKEA. So keeping an inventory or a big inventory was really not an option for us. And some of the products that were available at the time required a good bit of inventory, and they were kind of expensive, and Brent can attest to this. So then we thought, okay, we can't keep these in stock. We can't afford to keep these in stock. So why don't we come up with our own? After we had taken care of a few patients and made some molds and done a handful of fittings, fast forward, we had about 10 to 20 molds in the background, and we looked at each other and thought, boy, a lot of these look really similar. As a matter of fact, I can't even tell left from right, and they all seem to fall within these size ranges. Why don't we just pre-make some that sort of encompass what we're seeing here? And P.S., why don't we also figure out a way to put our practice logo and branding on it? That way, the patients, if they're discharged, we won't lose them.
So with that, what do you, so that it's a pretty innovative way to kind of get into a new practice. And I've heard a couple clinicians do it that way. But as far as, incidences and that sort of thing, and the benefits to not only the patient, but then also the caregivers and the surgeons, can you take us down a little bit of that road with some of just the practical objective numbers, right? Subjectively, we know, okay, hey, we're protecting the limb, but objectively, what are we doing?
Right. So you're talking about fast forwarding from, us making our own to, it was probably about 2018 where we were at a meeting, and I want to say that was maybe the last time the national meeting was in Atlanta. And we'd go to the trade show, we'd go to the national meeting and set up a table. And I met a gentleman named Jim Reichman. And Jim, I call Jim the sensei of limb protectors. He worked for a national company, and he was tasked with business development. And he realized quite early that the most successful practices within the company were using limb protectors, just hands down. And so he's a very curious guy and decided, I'm going to do a deep dive into the research. What's the evidence behind this stuff? And so Jim actually went on to pursue a master's in public health, where he actually did his thesis on limb protectors and amputee support. But it's really his baby. But Jim introduced me to, we'd all heard the expression evidence-based practice. How much we're able to successfully use it in a small practice in our decision-making. We do our best, obviously. This was one of those areas that, as Jim pointed out, and Jim would argue, and I believe there's a lot to support this, it is probably limb protectors, removable rigid dressings, is probably one of the most thoroughly researched parts of the O&P industry, but it's actually only used about 20% of the time at best. So it's not that well adopted. So that's our first piece of data. Patients in removable rigid dressings or limb protectors, and a lot of this research is level 1 studies. And I like to say level 1 studies are equivalent to having, the best Amazon review. You've got 100,000 5-star reviews of all verified buyers. That means this is legit. So removable rigid dressing patients began prosthetic use faster by 2 weeks as compared to patients using elastic wrap and a knee immobilizer, which, Joris, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's sort of, in some areas, they consider that care for an amputee after surgery. Secondly, amputees of the entire population inpatient in the hospital have the highest fall rate. So they have a fall rate of about 20%. Second highest is stroke. So a lot of people don't even realize, these amputees, as Brent mentioned earlier, because of their sensation compromise and they feel like they have a limb, they're very prone to falling. 47% of below-knee amputees that suffer a fall and they require a revision surgery 47% of those that require revision surgery end up with an above knee amputation. That one, and I actually spoke to Jim recently, and every time he tells me, I'm floored. And then one of the other bullet points that Jim always hits upon, and he used this quite a bit when he was trying to increase use of limb protectors in the business, is return on investment. So when he would talk to surgeons, when you talk to hospitals to get them to adopt these protocols, revision surgeries of a patient who has had a fall from after an amputation. So after they're sutured up, they're in the hospital, they fall. Revision surgeries cost between $25,000 to $30,000. In the hospital, the physician, they are not reimbursed for that. So that is on them. It's a big no-no. It's been shown that the use of a rigid dressing or a limb protector, revision surgeries from falls are eliminated. So it's a simple step, very small investment. It just makes sense ethically from a healing standpoint, from a protection standpoint, but it also makes financial sense for the payers and the hospitals.
Okay, this sounds really good. I mean, it sounds really cost effective. Because, and what do these things cost just about? Like, what would it be the cost for a patient, or what would the protector itself cost? Because the whole thing. I know it's different depending on how you buy it and stuff, but just give us kind of an idea.
Yeah, I'd say depending on the region you're in, you're talking about a few $100 for a limb protector.
Okay, that sounds super cost effective. And then I was wondering another thing is because these guys are so used to falling, protecting the limb sounds a good idea, but are they also used to getting like head wounds and stuff, like other stuff, just because you just tumble around much more because you don't know how to balance yourself and all that kind of stuff?
That's a really good question. I don't know I don't have any data on the incidence of other injuries associated with falling, but I've got to think that those are up there. I mean, it's funny when I go to meetings and I talk about fall rate, because frankly, I inpatient, and I don't know if you've experienced this, Brent, but I actually haven't seen an amputee fall inpatient when I was in there. And I have a lot of clinicians will tell me that, well, I've never seen them fall. And the thing is, we're talking about, of the 30 or 45 minutes that we're able to encounter somebody in the hospital. It's not a great data point, but the data shows these folks are falling. It's a very precarious situation.
And I'm also interested in knowing a little bit, because I think one thing that we're going to rewind a little bit. I don't want to be too annoying, but I was just wondering, you met this one guy who told you, who's just evangelizing this kind of clinician-based database approach. You met these other people that showed you this product. There seems to be a lot of happenstance there, but also there's a lot of networking there. I mean, are you like a natural networker? Are you always all over people, talking to people, or do you have to make yourself doing this, or did you get super lucky?
Yes, both. I am I think most people in O&P are just innately curious. I always describe us as sort of tinkerers. Like you have to like problem solving things. And so, yeah, I've always been the sort of curious person. And if someone's got an interesting spin on things, and I've bugged Brent in the past about different ideas, you want to just sort of tinker. So yeah, I've always been a very curious person. And it's one of the reasons I love going to the meetings. I just love engaging with fellow clinicians and talking about their practice and talking about what they're doing, what they're doing differently, and brainstorming, that sort of thing. So lucky in a sense that, I do happen to happen across people that I find just been, shared my curiosity and want to talk about what they're doing. But then again, I just sort of share that, just wanting to improve things. A day doesn't go by that I'm not thinking of a different design for an improved limb protector. And when Laura hears this, she's going to roll her eyes because I'm texting her images. I'm always in Mesh Mixer trying to retool things and figure out different ways to protect things. And so, yeah, it's sort of it's luck with running into the right people, and two, just being innately curious.
Okay, that's good. And what do you have any advice for people who are maybe not naturally as extrovert, who, because it seems like, you're just like, if you network, like some people see it as a burden, but like if you do this with curiosity in mind and just meeting new people, you're really creating chances for yourself, not only business chances but friendships and stuff. Do you have any kind of advice for somebody who is maybe not a natural networker, not as extroverted, how to get them to make these connections?
Um, Gosh. Well, I'll use this as an example. My son introduced me to LinkedIn a year ago. I'd been on LinkedIn, but I really didn't use it. But he introduced me to, he said, Dad, Limbguard's really a B2B product. You need to be on LinkedIn. You have to have a dedicated Limbguard LinkedIn page. And one of the things I've realized is I used to think, okay, well, and then he introduced me to Canva at the same time. And I thought, boy, I really need to curate things, and I really need to make the message really hit home and just be awesome. And one of the things I've learned over time is that showing, trying to make your post relatable. Um, we, as a practice owner, we were flawed. I didn't always run reports to make sure we were capturing all the patients we fit. But then after a while, and I was lucky enough to, again, speaking of luck, meeting Jennifer Robinson, who joined us from the mean streets of Florida, O&P, which is a really competitive O&P market, came up to Durham and joined us, and just really introduced me to a very disciplined approach to care. But talking about that, when I go to meetings, I talk to folks and I say, look, I know you don't want to do this, or I know you're nervous about talking to a new referral source. I was there. I didn't love that. It can be uncomfortable. You're invading their space. Half the time, they're not thrilled that you're in their clinic. But so talking and relating to folks, and even when I'm face to face with folks, you talk about your insecurities in terms of building your business. And it makes it more relaxed for me, and I think maybe it comes across as more authentic because it really is.
Yeah, and also about like, because like the O&P market isn't huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the a lot of traditional funding things, like think VCs or maybe even banks, like they presuppose like a huge market. And was it difficult for you guys to get funding, or you just had no other option? You were just like self-funded because like sweat equity because you had to do it, kind of.
Yes, sweat equity, and probably to a fault. We to backtrack a little bit in terms of the evolution of Limbguard. We were making our own for a while, and we didn't. I remember one day I had this business advisory guy come in and say, just because you can make all these doesn't mean you should. And the light bulb went off with Laura and I, and we looked at each other and thought, okay, we're here on Saturday making all these things. If we're really going to try to grow this, I think this was before the people used the expression scaling it. But if we were going to scale this, we need to figure out another way to have these made. And we always had a great relationship with the folks at Frittles Orthopedic. And we took a trip down and met with Becca, Rachel, and Frank. And we said, here's our idea. We want to make these. We fit a bunch of these things. They're kind of easy to make. And this is what it does. And we think it should cost this much. And I remember at one point we were sort of mid-sentence in our pitch. And Rachel looks at us and is like, yes, we'll do it. We thought, oh, wow, someone else likes our idea. We've got something here. We're not completely crazy. And so that was pivotal in really kind of growing things.
And that's wonderful. I mean, but what I see, especially in like a hardware business, is that it's very difficult to find a supplier that's perfect for your stage of growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those people that are perfect at making 5 of these a day are great, right? But if you need 100, then all of a sudden they're going to be like woefully inequipped to do this. And then the next bigger option, right? You'll be too small for them. So what is loyalty like in that relationship? I mean, because at one point these guys aren't going to be the cheapest. At one point, you could say, you know what, we could go to China, we could do this really differently. Do you really believe in loyalty in the long run, or are you just like, look, this makes sense to us. We're all grown ups. This is like a business relationship because we have a mutual dependence. It's financially attractive for both of us.
We have zero loyalty. I'm just kidding. We, the relationship we've had with Frittles is it's really just been a handshake. We've had great communication. We're business partners, but we're friends, and we have open lines of communication. We text all the time. We're always trying to forecast, what things are going to look like down the road and anticipate. And that's not to say we haven't had bumps in the road. We have a great relationship with the folks at Paceline that make our limb sock. And, I guess to answer your question is, we really value the relationships we have. We value how we do business. We like what we're doing. We like the product. It checks a lot of boxes. After I sold my clinical practice, I thought, okay, well, I'm semi-retired, but I'm doing the Limbguard thing as sort of a side thing. And about 6 months ago, my wife looked at me and said, you realize you've made Limbguard a full-time job. Like, you think you work 2 hours a day, but you work 8 hours a day. And it's true. We like the way we do things. We like that our products are made in the States and that we know the folks and we like the folks we're working with. That's not to say we don't have bumps, as I said. But I think it also makes us better as business people. It makes us more aware of potential problems down the road. We know the limitations of smaller fabrication, so it forces us to be a little bit more aware and maybe be a little bit more diligent with forecasting. I'm still hoping for a chat GPT plugin where I can just upload our spreadsheets and it just tells us what to do and what to expect down the road. But we haven't found that plugin yet.
So I'm really surprised that Joris didn't jump all over your use of Mesh Mixer. Joris loves Mesh Mixer, and he loves
this
Base
is the
Mode.
one tool. Mesh Mixer is the one tool that is keeping at least the additive manufacturing 3D printing part of the OMP industry going. It's amazing. And on one hand, I want to shout it from the rooftops to thank everybody at Autodesk. Mm-hmm. And at the other hand, I don't want them to know about it because maybe they'll forget about this kind of orphan tool. It's kind of like just floating out there, and then they're like, it doesn't fit into our current platform strategy, and they'll kill it, right? So I love Mesh Mixer, and it's my doodle everything for 3D tool. I love it to death. But that does imply that you're doing some 3D printing stuff as well, right?
Yes, I do quite a bit of prototyping. We are working on a new concept, and I'm printing some mini versions that I sort of play with and sort of experiment with. I think, Brent, you introduced me to CME CNC. I have one of their Delta printers at home, so it lets me print taller stuff, and I can get everything I need to on there. And it's certainly not what you're working with, Brent, but it gets me the working versions of it. But to your point about Mesh Mixer, I love Mesh Mixer so much. It is, I tell my kids when I saw that, what I liked about it, when my son is a software engineer, and I said, it's antiquated, and I know CAD folks look down upon the Mesh Mixer folks, or at least I think they do. But I love the interface. It looks like the layout and the big buttons. It looks like Fisher Price designed it for me, which is exactly my sophistication level. I actually met a guy at a meeting in San Francisco, and there was a representative from Autodesk, And we got in a conversation. I took him aside. I was like, I need you to promise me you guys will never get rid of mesh mixer. Look me in the eyes because I need this. I've almost gone so far as to have just a dedicated laptop that's not connected to the web with mesh mixer sitting on it in case they ever get rid of it.
I totally agree. I hope that I love mesh mixer. I hope Autodesk never finds out about it. And I love that you mentioned, you gave a shout out to See Me CNC. Oh my goodness, I'd almost forgotten they existed. I like they made pretty like really good Delta printers, but that to me was like a lifetime in 3D print land ago. And I'm so happy that you're using it and you're happy with it.
Oh yeah, I love, it's just a great, American company. If you need some support, Steve, he replies.
That's one. And then how about like if you're trying to like, because I could imagine that though a bunch of people here are looking at like inventing stuff with 3D printing. If you're going to be doing this in a mesh mixer to desktop 3D printer like kind of way, and you like you're not well grounded in CAD maybe, although you did have that biomechanics like study, so I guess you did pick up some here and there, right? But maybe, but what advice would you have for me? Like if I wanted, like imagine I'm sitting and I'm listening to this show. I'm an orthotist or whatever. I have my dream, my dream product in my head. What are some of the tips of making that product come out and making that product work?
Yeah. Well, to the first part of your question, when I was in biomechanics school, we didn't use the internet. We didn't have email. This was the dark ages.
Okay.
I'm old, but in terms of, I always tell, it's funny, I was just texting my son this morning because he finished an app, and he loves working in apps and developing apps, and he's sort of a tinker in the software space. And he made this app that had some really cool features, and it'll use some little AI and incorporate Spotify properties. And Spotify came back after their application, like after 3 months ago. Spotify came back and said, "No, you can't do that." And we were texting this morning. I said, he said, "Bad news." I said, "No, it's not bad news. You put in the reps. You put in hours that pushed you down the road and got you closer to the 10,000 hours that you need to put in to reach the mastery level of anything. So it wasn't a waste. You made a cool, minimally viable product, and it looks cool, and you should be proud as heck. So what I'm getting at is do it. Put in the reps. I've actually shown Brent a couple of things we've come up with over the years, and it's about tinkering. And if you don't have a 3D printer, then use plaster or cardboard or plastic, and just actually go through the action of making things. I always consider that a big test, is like how. Yeah, I have folks and I have friends I went to school with who come to me like, I got this idea, and they kind of explain it, and I was like, well, show me what you got. Like, I'm not making anything. We can get a prototype. And it's like, no, I feel like you really need to roll up your sleeves and get dirty and figure out the limitations of things. And so what I'm saying is, go through the action of making the product, and you learn so much with just making different iterations of things. I mean, I'm your head would spin if you saw the little samples and prototypes I have here in my shop of different things, and it's not limited to OMB. I mean, I made a thing for our coffee grinder the other day, and I was like, oh man, that's a good idea. Let's use this. And then my wife rolled her eyes and said, not another one of these printed things in my kitchen.
Well, and that's interesting that you say that. There is a difference between ideas and execution.
Yeah.
For sure. And then, I mean, I think really it comes down to, and I'd love for you to speak to this, is, as people get deeper and deeper into the additive manufacturing side, it really, to me, becomes a communication tool of what you're wanting. So as a clinician, if you cannot express what you are trying to do and what the result you want is, it's not that other people can't do it. It's
Mm-hmm.
that the clinician actually is not a very good communicator. Would you
Mm-hmm.
agree or disagree with that statement?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that, and I've actually not heard that idea of printing and being an expression, because I think so often it's thought of as uh, printing is the thing. It is the idea. It is. It's really just sort of the end result of working through all the shortcomings of your idea. Um, you know, not to beat the mesh mixture thing up too much, but I mean, when you have an idea and you actually start modeling something in mesh mixture, you learn a lot when you see it in 3 dimension. You think, oh wow, I can't do this. This doesn't look like this can physically happen. Or you think, oh, this is amazing. So I think um, I'm losing track here, but yeah, I agree with you completely. I think it is sort of an indication of how well or how well thought out something is.
Yeah, and that's a good idea. And also, I want to point out to people who are maybe not software minded or something. I know a bunch of people that prototype in Lego, right?
Yeah.
Or use clay or something like that. But I know a bunch of people have made like full devices with electronics and stuff, with Lego being the body of it, right? So there are other options there if you're not very software minded at all. And looking back at this practice, do you miss the practice at all? Now you're doing this thing. It's a product business. Do you miss the patience? Do you miss that long term relationship?
I do. I do miss the patient care. Towards the tail end of things, I was fairly removed from patient care, and had this paradigm shift. I was more instead of working in the clinic, I was working on the clinic, and I actually really did enjoy that. I had we'd had the practice for 20 years, and at the tail end, I I did. I wanted a different challenge, and so I sort of removed myself from clinical care, and I do I do miss that aspect of working on the business. Um, I did this. Are you guys familiar with lean manufacturing?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
So I did this deep dive, and I say deep dive, it means I watched 20 YouTube videos on these different ways that folks have incorporated lean. And so I thought, wow, this is really cool. Like we can really create some efficiencies if we make strong visual cues about how things are to be done, and even just the physicality where things are supposed to be placed in a practice. Because um, it's so much of O&P is just the physical devices. And so I really got kind of geeked out about organizing the clinic space in terms of where things were staged in different aspects of production. Um, even even I actually went a little overboard. I'm sure my employees roll their eyes if anyone listen to this, but I got into. Are you guys familiar with Kaizen foam?
Oh yeah, you cut those
Yeah.
things out, didn't you?
Oh, yes, sir. And every clinic, I'd go in on a Saturday and I'd trace every tool, and I'd have the Kaizen foam laid out, and it was especially, the tool rack laid out perfectly, and it was beautiful. And initially, there was tons of eye rolling, and I looked at folks and I said, "Look, I know I'm a dork. I know I'm always rearranging things." But guess what? You don't have to ask where the Phillips head screwdriver is. You don't have to ask where the hammer is, because it's right here. And it goes right back in this little spot. And there's little efficiencies. And it's funny because it took, after a while, folks, I noticed, wow, tools are always back in the same spot. It's easy. So just one little example of just trying to create efficiencies and things. And I really do miss that. Although I do try to incorporate that into the way Laura and I run Limbguard. We run into challenges all the time, and when we meet, I think, okay, what do we need to do to never have this problem again? What sort of safeguards do we need to put in place? And so we think about things in that respect. We try to think about things, in the lean perspective. You're always thinking about things from the customer experience, and so our customers being other O&P clinics. And so how do we make this experience of using a Limbguard or purchasing them from us, how do we make it easy? How do we make it make complete sense to have an inventory of Limbguards and be ready to take care of the patients when you get that call? Because the calls always come at 4:30, 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon.
It's super cool. And also, by the way, the one thing, maybe you do this already, maybe you haven't realized, but a ton of people are now turning to 3D printing to make poka-yoke type of improvised guides and ways for people to make less errors as well.
Yeah.
So in manufacturing companies, and they're making trays, for example, like simpler as the Kaizen foam. They're making labels for things, ways to lock certain things, ways to make certain tools a little less accessible, others more accessible. So 3D printing poka-yoke might be something you would love to get involved with as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think O&P is I think if someone was I know they have different levels like black belts and things like that with me. If somebody was one of those, I think you could really help the O&P community in going to practices. I mean, Brent, you and I have walked into clinics, and the level of organization it varies. And boy, if you could sort of standardize the way things are done, I think someone could just have a field day with our industry.
It is universally funny just to walk into an O&P place and you see like the rack of, Allen keys, and every rack has missing the 3, 4, and 5 millimeter key. They're somewhere. And then they have stacks and stacks of 8 millimeter keys, 6 millimeter keys, because they keep on going and buying these kits. That stuff drives me nuts.
It makes my skin crawl. It makes my skin crawl. I think it's a healthy obsession when it comes to working on a business. If you're a decision maker in a clinic, I think it is, creating efficiencies. I think some of the mindset of lean is it sort of creates a sense of calm, and it's not only just efficiency. It's just like, all right, this just the place has a better vibe when it's more organized. You tend to, I mean, I can say undoubtedly you put out better work. Things just look cleaner, and they just, I don't know, it just creates a more chill vibe. So.
Okay, and I just want to one completely unrelated question. I love where we're going here with this, but I wanted to ask is one thing: how do you sell your practice? I mean, I think this is something that a lot of people have occurred to or thought about this, and maybe, but I don't know if there's a workshop or something, but maybe people don't know how to do this. How do you sell your practice? Do you sell it by not selling it?
That's a good question. It's the way we decided to go is to engage a broker. We actually at one point put in a call to folks at Lloyd's Capital, and just wanted to just have a Q&A. What does this look like? How do you sell a practice? A ton of questions answered that way. The benefit of using a broker, they've got, they understand what the entities that are buying practices, they understand what they're looking at. And so it can be educational for you. It did shape the way we ran our business at one point, after we realized, okay, these are the things that they really care about. That was the way we went. They obviously had executed a lot of deals in O&P, and so they knew what was appealing to buyers and who were the buyers at the time. And so it was one of those situations where we just sort of put the feelers out, and it actually happens very quickly. I always tell folks, before you go down this road, make sure you're ready to sell. I mean, I've talked to folks who've sold their practice and they miss it dearly, and they feel, gosh, there's this void now. I'd been at it for 20 years and I was ready. And so I also caution people, like, before you go down that road, make sure you're ready, because it can happen. And then you're not sort of the decision maker in the practice anymore, and you have to be okay with that. But brokers seem like a great way for us to go. And
And what were the things that they were looking for that the sellers were really interested that maybe you hadn't realized? Like, is it just revenue? Is it how well you manage your finances? What are the stuff that they're really interested that kind of surprised you?
What surprised me was how, I've always been an IP guy. Intellectual property. I just thought that was like, that brought a lot of value. And so we had a good bit of that. But no, that really wasn't. It was very black and white. When you're dealing with the M&A team, mergers and acquisitions, they know numbers. They want to know how much money is going out, how much money is coming in. And it really is sort of that basic. There is some nuance in terms of how secure the distribution of your revenue is, in terms of, is it all coming from one referral source? Do you have a nice varied pipeline of referral sources from various different referral sources, and it's a nice healthy mix, and you don't have all your eggs in one basket that can go away. They really like a healthy amount of prosthetic referrals, and it's no secret. And obviously, I'm a big believer in limb protectors. That was one thing we had heard a couple of times. It's like, okay, you've got this relationship with all these referral sources, and they're calling you to fit the limb protector. And so you have this, obviously we retain those patients if you're doing it right. So that creates a very healthy pipeline of referrals for prosthetics.
Okay, that's cool. And how about patients? I mean, some of these people you presumably had for 20 years or 10 years. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you do with that transition? Like saying like, hey, Bob, so yeah, it's going to be somebody else. Here's Rajiv. He's going to be taking care of you from Tuesday. How do you do that in a kind of an organized way for a patient?
When we decided to sell, we did have a very a good game plan, and fortunately, a lot of my team stayed behind, and so I had, as I'd mentioned, removed myself from clinical practice. And so me not being part of the equation wasn't so bad. However, I do see one of my old patients at Costco. She works at Costco, and I see her every week when I'm there, and she wants to talk. But it's so for us, it was very methodical, and a lot of my team stayed behind. And so that was a nice organic transition. And I like to think, I wasn't involved in the clinical practice after the sale. But after touching base with my former employees, it seems like things transitioned pretty nicely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for being so open-hearted and clear about the product businesses, but also the practice, your experience there, and limb protection. So thank you so much for being on our podcast today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. This is fun.
Cool. And thanks, Brent, for being there as well, of course.
Yeah. Oh, I thought this was great. And I think it'll give our listeners really a lot of insight into this idea of not only the limb protection, hopefully people will look that up and look you up, but then also, some of the product development and being creative and kind of the product life, right? From the idea of iterations to final production and everything in between. So hopefully that our listeners will get some encouragement for that as well.
Hopefully Autodesk listens to this too. They keep messaging to
Oh my goodness.
No. We're gonna hide it from them. We're gonna
that's right.
geo-block it from like San Francisco and stuff, so they never find out about us. Keep it on the down low. Anyway, thank you so much for Advanced 3D for sponsoring us. So if you need some engineering services or some 3D print services, or you're just curious what that would mean for you, hit them up. All right, thank you very much.